Hello and welcome to another episode of Empowering Equality, the Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada, or IWSCC's podcast on all things supplier diversity. I'm your host, Alex Dirksen, and I'm very thrilled to talk with my next guest today, Mr. Jeff Tiessen from Disability Today Network. Thanks so much for joining me, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Alex, for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. I know we've had one opportunity before now to meet in person, albeit brief, a busy event with lots of networking, lots of learning going on. So I'm very happy to get to know you a little better today. Maybe we could get started by, can you tell me a little bit more about Disability Today Network and what you do?
Yeah, I sure can. So Disability Today Network is one of our brands under Disability Today Publishing Group. It's a company
Okay.
I started over 30 years ago with a number of titles, mostly in the print world for most of our existence, magazines and table style books. But we've learned a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. COVID influenced that, and in
Mm,
ways to reach new audiences, greater audiences, and different ways of creating and sharing content. And we've moved into that digital world with micro learning, educational courses for the workplace
oh, okay.
around disability inclusion education.
It's such a trend when on this show, especially whenever I talk with entrepreneurs, it seems like and business owners, they're always very keen to share their knowledge as much as sort of run their business. So many educators out there. When I think of publishing, then and maybe for some folks at home as well, it's almost a little harder to understand maybe like a business to client structure. Or how you build relationships with say a client. So, to help me understand a little better, could you tell me a bit more about the sorts of clients per se that your organization and that your brands work with, or how you build out those networks?
Yeah, not an easy question to answer because it's different
Mm,
models for different titles. And we have a magazine called Thrive and Living Well with Limb Loss. So I'm a double arm amputee. So publisher bias on the creation of that one. But I love it. And being an amputee for over 47 years, I've certainly gone down the path of what's needed, what's missing, where people are after losing a limb or stumbling. So it's a publication that really helps people in their lives, amputees in their lives. And with that one, it's a very niche publication, like most of ours are. You wouldn't find it in on the magazine racks and
mm,
in too
okay.
many places. But to your point about reaching clients, so it's about partnerships for us. So I am a prosthetic wearing amputee, and like others, we to get our limbs and to maintain them, we need to go through one of 80 doors, prosthetic clinics in the country. So we've partnered with the Orthotics Prosthetics Canada organization, for example. There are other partnerships like that, and we provide copies for the waiting room for people to peruse, and it's a great way to reach them. And then if they want to get that delivered to their home, then they subscribe. So, it can be a challenge at times reaching your audience, and certainly
Mm.
social media helps with that, and a website, and it's connections and partnerships.
Yeah, great. So I definitely, and you mentioned the connection between being a double arm amputee and starting, especially a publication focused on the amputee world and that experience. In sort of the grander scheme of things, because you mentioned you also sort of have multiple brands under your umbrella. What led you to get started as an entrepreneur? Were you always interested in publishing or sharing others' stories in journalism, or how'd you find your way there?
Yeah, definitely. It's what I love most about what I do is telling other people's stories and sharing those. Obviously, how did I start as an entrepreneur? I think it was Jeff's Lawn and Garden Service when I was
Oh,
11 years old. Always had
excellent.
the entrepreneurial spirit, and then I sold jackets, and I can't even remember all the failed business. And the lawn and garden was pretty good, but there's some other failed ones along the way, and I started working for a company in the U.S. that had a publication for the disability community, and it was a working relationship that went a bit sour, a bit south, pardon the
Oh,
pun.
too bad.
So I often joke about, why did you start disability today? Out of spite. I, I, um, I thought, you know what, I think I can do this on my own. I was young enough to think I could do it on my own, and just started with kind of blind faith. But again, surrounding myself, I knew enough to surround
Mm-hmm.
myself with people that had experience in the business, and who would support and champion what I was doing. And that started with a magazine called Disability Today many years ago.
Wow, yeah, and I'm hearing a lot of commonalities with other folks I've spoken with, and lots of entrepreneurs that I meet. That feeling that you've got to carve your own space out, sometimes out of spite, maybe, and as well the knowledge. You mentioned kind of starting it when you were young, maybe a little young and foolish, young and ambitious, but also that you even at the time you appreciated partnerships and you appreciated the way that it takes a team to build an effective business. And it sounds like that's carried along in your sort of your whole career as you built out several brands, and you're still building partnerships today to share those stories. And we're so happy at the IWSCC to consider you a member of our community and another fantastic partnership there. I always like to ask my guests, whether they're a certified supplier or a corporate member, when it comes to the IWSCC and being, say, diverse certified, what does that mean to you?
You know, it's important, absolutely. And for me, it's a real bonus opportunity in this disability community. Before you can sell anything, there's always an educational process, and getting corporate Canada to understand why they should be advertising
Mm,
in a disability publication, and getting these partners that I mentioned, why, getting them on board, and what the importance of their contribution to the quality and independence of life for people with disabilities. So, and I could have started the magazine as a nonprofit, as many thought I should, but I thought, we're advocating for equality and equity and inclusion even 30 years ago. Let's kind of walk the talk here, and go at this as a business. So, jumping to the
right.
IWSCC, what a great opportunity to meet corporate your corporate partners that have a vested interest, that some of that education is already done. Finally, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to do it. So we come to the table with open minds, and a real sense of importance of inclusion and diversity.
Yeah, that's great. When it's a quality we're very proud of, and we want to keep maintaining on and on into the future. That we hear from a lot of, especially our suppliers, being either persons with disabilities or veterans who own businesses, is that feeling of stepping into a space where the buyer that you're meeting, all these networking opportunities, meet the buyer events, so on and so forth, that you can go to, where you're arriving and they're aware of this quality that contributes to your life, contributes to your experience. You don't necessarily feel like you have to over explain. And especially in your case, and a lot of the organizations that we work with, when it comes to the advocacy piece as well, understanding for disability, the importance of engaging with persons with disabilities, the language that you use in those spaces, and the ways in which it contributes positively to the entrepreneurial experience rather than sort of takes away from it or becomes this barrier itself. You kind of step into the room, a networking opportunity, an elevator pitch, or just a chance to learn from other members of your community where the stage is already set a little bit. So I hope that that's definitely a quality we can, like I said, maintain for as long as we can, forever, I hope.
Yeah, and that learning, and sometimes unlearning. I mean, it's ongoing. It's dynamic. It's not static. Once I've seen the language change in the disability community how many times, and the 3 to almost 4 decades that I've been working at it, and that's what mindset, and that's the brand name of the e-learning course that we've developed is all about, introducing that language, sharing what ableism means,
Mm,
bias and unconscious bias. And in it, we've utilized a cast of about 20 subject matter experts, all with disabilities, all with very different disabilities, sharing their lived experience and their perspective. So I really feel that inclusion kind of starts with familiarity and
mm.
conversations, like you just said, and getting to know us and understanding us, and that's where the empathy comes. And I steer away from the kind of training
Mm.
description. I was a Paralympic athlete. I trained my body for many years. I've trained dogs. I've trained horses. Trained my kids. I just to use the body. Uh, so it's conversations, introductions, a comfort level, and like the folks uh, in our course say, intention is everything. Don't worry about making mistakes. If you come
Mm.
at this with the right attitude, I guess to say it simply, the pieces come together nicely.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned unlearning. I think that that's just as important a quality to remember, especially as busy professionals, as procurement experts, as supply chain professionals, as entrepreneurs, and as business owners. We're under a lot of pressure all the time to feel like we have to know everything, like we have to always be right, like those mistakes might cost you business, might cost you success, when in reality, it always seems to be the case. Like you said, intention is 9/10, and that honest intention of trying to just keep on learning and stay on the learning process and be open minded. And willing to try new things is just as important a quality. And I see that so much again in so many of the folks I talk with, both the business owners always trying new things, always carving those spaces out for themselves. And also with our corporate members, they're always representing organizations that are forward thinking, are doing their best, are engaging with us because they want to do more business with veteran owned businesses and disabled owned businesses. And while I don't want to paint it like there's just a definite right way and a wrong way, there's definitely that intention of like we want to do it right and we want to make those connections the right way in a meaningful way. And the IWSCC is so happy to help support that. Um, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. My conversations are always they're not the longest, but I love to have these little opportunities to get to know members of our community a little better. I like to end these conversations with some more personal questions to kind of just get to know you a little less the businessman and a little more the person. But before I jump into those, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience about your business, about yourself? Maybe you mentioned your course, like an opportunity to join in on that or get some learning.
Yeah, this first iteration of mindset, it's called disability literacy 101, and it is for the workplace environment. So
Okay.
it's about allyship. It's about that comfort and confidence and competence levels where it comes to again allyship. So yeah, that's where we've started, and we are now working on the second iteration for the post-secondary environment,
Very
and
cool.
and then sports and recreation community is next. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're really proud of what we've put out, and it's very unique. It's not prescriptive. It's not do's and don'ts and shalls and shall nots. It's conversations and learning and unlearning, like we talked about.
Yeah, very cool. You're kind of touching so many different communities and so many different avenues. And like you said, it sounds like the course pulls from, such an important thing that we talk about all the time, that idea of lived experience and what that really means. But your course pulls from, you said like over 20 different folks with each their own disability. So then their own experience and their own ability to tell you a little bit more about themselves and help boost that confidence. The I think that's another piece. Whether we're engaging with someone with a disability we're less familiar with, or who's from a culture that we're less familiar with, there can be some nervousness, like we'll say the wrong thing or something like that. So helping those opportunities to help build that confidence, I think also help us build relationships. So super awesome, super fantastic.
You're absolutely right. We're not big on the percentages and stats and numbers and studies so much in it, but a few that we found really interesting that we shared that something like only 1/3 of the population of Canada know someone with a disability, which is such a strange percentage to me because now we're kind of pushing 25% with the new of the population, that being the disability community, with episodic and chronic health disabilities, neurodiversity being added to that. But importantly, I think where that number comes from is that the study also showed that 40% of people, able-bodied people, non-disabled, as our community likes to refer to them, avoid people with disabilities because they don't
Mm.
know what to say, and they
Hmm.
don't want that awkward encounter for both them or the individual with the disability. So, breaking through that awkwardness and just having a conversation, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, a little bit of learning even in our conversation today. So I hope our listeners out there are getting a little bit of information as well. To kind of round out our information for today, like I said, I have kind of some personal questions as well. Maybe throw you a little bit of a curveball, but here an easy one to start. When you're not running disability today, when you're not being, Jeff Tiessen, the businessman, and you're just being Jeff Tiessen, the athlete. It sounds like the trainer, almost sort of circus trainer. You've got so many different animals under your belt as well. How do you like to spend your spare time?
Yeah, like so I'm an entrepreneur. What spare time?
Yeah, they always hit me with that.
Everybody gives you that answer, right?
Yeah,
No, I've come to the age now in my, the twilight of my 50s that I am trying to give some time back. And I really enjoyed raising kids. I have two, they're adults now, but it's a different kind of relationship with them, and I love spending time with them. I'm an avid boater in the summer. It's a nice place to work
yeah.
on the boat. Keeping myself fit with swimming and cycling. Yeah, kind of a hobby photographer. Love to travel, and yeah, horses are a passion too.
Yeah, I'm sure it seems like it's always the case with journalists, always trying new things out, looking for new stories, avenues, things to experience. So that totally makes sense. For a different kind of experience, in a past life, I was a humble fry cook. I was making all day breakfast for people. So I'm very passionate about breakfast. So I always like to ask everybody what their favorite breakfast food is. So when you get to start the day your favorite way, what's your favorite breakfast food?
Well, now that, as I mentioned, I'm trying to take a little bit better care of myself, it happens to be homemade oatmeal for the health perspective.
Okay.
I could eat breakfast all day long. My favorite meal as well. So, in my local, dives and haunts here, it's I don't even need the menu. It is the straight up two eggs over easy
The
and the
classic,
rye toast.
absolutely. I will say, I also got on the oatmeal train very recently. It was something, I'll admit, maybe as like a bit of a younger guy, I was like, oh, that's an old man's breakfast. But man, you got your simple ones like your maple and your brown sugar and so on, but you can get your berries in there, you can get your yogurt in there, you can get your nuts in there, you can make yourself such a big hearty breakfast of a million different kinds with oatmeal. So I have grown a whole new love and a new understanding of the ways that I can start my day. So I won't.
That's great.
I definitely I can't knock oatmeal. I can't shame anybody for
Oh,
making
thank you. Yeah, thank you very,
it.
very much. And you can dress it up in many ways, right? So that's
Absolutely, you can go bananas with some bananas.
one of my
Um,
favorite.
so my last question that I always love to ask everybody, maybe a little more serious, maybe not, but whether it's for business or for life, what's a good piece of advice?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a tough one too. It's something I've always told my kids: trust yourself. We often ruminate over decisions. We regret some of our decisions, and we make decisions in the moment, often with the tools the experience, the lived experience that we have. So
Hmm.
I try and steer away from regretting some of the bad ones I've made in life and in business. But yeah, if you've done the preparation and the homework, that's what I lean into. Trust, yeah, be convicted have conviction with your decisions and live with them.
Excellent. Yeah. Sometimes, a little trust goes a long way. And a little bit of advice can go a long way too. So I hope that I know for me, that's given me something to think about. And I hope it does for our listeners too. And as we're heading out, I just want to say thanks so much, Jeff, for joining me on the show. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little better today.
And likewise, Alex, thanks so much. Pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much to our audience as well for joining us. Empowering Equality is a show hosted by the Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada, or IWSCC. We connect disabled owned and veteran owned businesses with opportunity across Canada. Big thank you to Pod Supply for producing this episode, and to our sponsors, RBC and Bell, for supporting our American Sign Language. As our 2024 ASL leader, RBC helps us provide American Sign Language for our show and for all of our events, with additional support from champions like Bell. And that interpretation is provided by Maple Communications Canada. If you want to learn more about the IWSCC, you can visit us at www.iwscc.ca. If you want to learn more about Disability Today or their various publications, Jeff, where can we find you?
Our website is a great place to start, and that is www.disabilitytodaynetwork.com.
Excellent. Okay. And we'll include that link in the description so folks can go and check that out as soon as possible. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, then absolutely check out Disability Today and all their publications. Like, subscribe, follow, favorite the show, IWSCC, Disability Today. Jeff Tiessen, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to trust yourself a little bit more and keep on empowering equality. And we'll see you next time.